Okay, welcome back. Happy Monday. That Muhammad Ali-Joe Frazier fight was the most, I think, brutal, gruesome heavyweight boxing championship fight, if not fight period, ever. In the last round, at the end of the 14th round, Joe Frazier's corner threw in the towel. He couldn't see. His eyes had been so beaten, they were so swollen, he literally couldn't see to defend himself. Probably would have been taken out. Meanwhile, on the other side of the squared circle, as they say, in his corner, Muhammad Ali said to his trainer, Angelo Dundee, said, I can't go on. And he literally was not going to be able to answer the bell. But before that could happen, Frazier, who couldn't answer the bell, his manager threw in the towel. That was how gruesome that fight was. 105-degree temperatures or something like that. Just horrible. So that's what we're not going to see tomorrow night. A gruesome, horrible, well-fought fight. We're going to see another chapter in the freak show. Oh, by the way, after the Frazier corner threw the towel in, Muhammad actually dropped to the canvas off his stool and passed out momentarily. He was that expended. He said, that's the closest I've ever come to death in my conscious life, he said. So that's not what we're going to see tomorrow night.
No, I think it'll be a little less exciting than that, but it's there won't be quite the drama. But on the other hand, I guess it might have some entertainment value because it will be interesting.
It will have that. There'll be 80 million people watching it for entertainment. Sure.
Yeah, I mean it wouldn't be difficult. Obviously, it'd be pretty easy to defeat either one of these people, these older guys, in a debate. But they're pretty evenly matched. Trump should have the advantage because Biden, I think, clearly has something going on that Trump doesn't in terms of dementia or whatever. But Trump can easily offset that with just saying stupid stuff or bragging incessantly.
Yes, correct. Trump he could easily say things that are just absurd and ridiculous and childlike and egomaniacal and stupid. Yes, he could do that. Let's see if they can actually get him to calm down and quiet his mouth. All they've got to do is act presidential, and he'll do all right. No problem. This election is really predicated on Democrats and Republicans hating Trump. They're so stupid, they don't understand that there are far bigger issues at stake here. The issue is what's left of the constitutional republic on one hand and abject communism on the other. That's the choice. That is your choice. Forget the people. Forget Trump. Forget Biden. It's not the issue that you need to be concerned with. The issue is, what are we voting for in terms of a future? Communism or what's left of the republic?
Oh, today I was social media was all a tither about Donald Trump's so-called revelation. Again, of course, and the great thing about it, Jeff, is that no matter what happens on either side now, the other side will claim it's not true. So the New York Times are claiming that Trump paid $750 in taxes or whatever. So the Trump side quickly claims, no, he actually paid $41 million or something, and he took it. But whatever, it's always fake news on the other side. But I tried to point out to people that this is, as I wrote about in Survival of the Richest, I wrote a book about these kind of perks and loopholes that the richest people get. This is. I tried to point out this is not, unusual behavior at all for the billionaire class. This is what they do. They don't pay taxes. Taxes are for suckers, basically, and that's it's a common riffraff.
It should not have come as a surprise to anyone.
No, and I remember Survival of the Richest before Trump ever became president. At that time, I think there were 3 different years he didn't pay any taxes. But this goes back to I began Survival of the Richest with a quote from the great Ambrose Bierce from the Devil's Dictionary, where he defined
Ambrose
poor.
Bierce, yeah.
One of my favorites, and his definition of poor was unable to pay taxes. For instance, Vanderbilt. And so that's how far that goes back. You know, that the rich have never paid their fair share of taxes. And I said, you know, if you want to be incensed about something, what about Amazon? Amazon has a lot more resources than Donald Trump has. They didn't pay any taxes the last zero taxes, not even $750 the last couple of years. And of course, I was accused of defending Trump. No, I'm not defending Trump, but at all. But the problem is, people on that other side can continue to insist that Donald Trump is some outlier, that this is, this has never been done before. You know, the other politicians and the other billionaires paid their fair share. You know, they did it by the book, and they didn't take advantage of these loopholes and absurd rigged system that Donald Trump did. And my point is that he's a product of a corrupt system, and he reflects that. But you people continue to act as if you're in horror that, oh my God, if we could just go back to the days before 2016, when the land and the milk and honey were flowing in the gold-plated streets, and there was no such thing as conspiracies or corruption. And my book Hidden History was written before. Trump doesn't appear in that book. It was published in 2014, and I've had tons of people who wrote reviews about it, who had me on their talk shows, who raved about the book, how I was not partisan at all. I was an equal opportunity critic who defriended me, called me names simply because I initially said some good things about Trump, and I continue to blast his critics. But as I said, have you forgotten what you said about Hidden History? I mean, look at what I documented there just from the JFK assassination through the Obama years. Right. It was a 9-stop timeline of crimes, conspiracies, and cover-ups. Thus the subtitle of the book. Murders and unnatural deaths everywhere. People falling off of buildings and being found dead in the woods, and suicides galore, and the Clinton body count alone. But they seem to act as if we could just get back to normal, like that was normal. That's what on the other, by contrast, as I said, about Trump, I don't see, first of all, he really hasn't done much of anything at all. So you can't do too much wrong if you don't do anything. Now, if you want to just say he's
now, that's a good point, Don. I like that. That's a good point, and it's valid, and it's correct. What do we have to hang this guy out with? I mean, you and I can go through and count all the lies, but what has he done, really, except lie? He hasn't done anything.
No, he tweets. He breaks promises. He says he's going to do one thing, and then usually doesn't do anything at all. But when
they all lie. Name me one major politician who doesn't lie. Come on.
Exactly. And the reason I think he's so disappointing is because a lot of the promises he made were revolutionary. I'm going to honor the Fed. I'm going to bring all the troops home. Things that other politicians do. Hinting at 9/11 truth, or things like that, JFK, things like that. So it's that's why people like me were so disappointed. But I realized long ago, okay, well, he's obviously he isn't this renegade billionaire. He is what we thought he was, But the fact remains that the country is completely divided around his personality, and the people on the left, the woke left, who have definitely have a real disorder, Trump derangement syndrome. They hate him for things he's never done. And the people on the right, I coined the term Trump enablement syndrome. I think that's what his cult has, that is still chanting the same slogans.
Well said. Well said. You could be a writer someday when you grow up. That's good.
Yeah, I have to try that. But that side love him for things he hasn't done. So both sides hate or love him basically for his tweets and the way he talks. And when I point that out, I get hit from both sides, because depending on which, whether you love or hate him, and they just can't they don't know how to deal with somebody like me. I'm an agnostic, to use our friend John Barber's term, a Trump agnostic. I would love if he ever did some of the things he said he was going to do, but I realize at this point he's not going to. And I just think he's disappointing. But on the other hand, there has been no Waco during his administration. There's been no Oklahoma City bombing lie and demonization of talk radio and the militia like it happened during the Clinton years, not to mention the body count and all the other things. There's been no weapons of mass destruction lie leading to an absurd, never-ending war and bombing and occupation that's killed who knows how many, including an embargo that killed how many, was 1 million people or something in Iraq, they claim. There's been nothing like
Oh,
that.
it's more than
9/11.
that. It's 2 to 3.
Yeah.
But whatever.
Yeah, the 9/11 lie, I mean, alone, that transformed this country, that brought us this never-ending war on terror against an unseen enemy that can't even be identified, that brought us the Patriot Act. There's been nothing like that under Trump, and even under Obama. There's been Trump never assassinated an American citizen like Anwar al-Awlaki, who was never even charged with a crime, let alone committed a crime, and then bragged about it, and then went and drone bombed and killed his 16-year-old son. So Trump has done nothing that can compare with that. I mean, somebody today on Facebook was telling me, well, these things. First of all, they brought up Russia stuff, and I said, look, you're talking this Russia nonsense. It's absurd. So when you bring Russia into it, you lose me right there. But anything that may have happened under Trump, I look at it like maybe the things that happened under Reagan, where I think Reagan, for a different reason, was pretty much clueless. I don't think he was really running the show at all, especially in the last part of his administration.
No, I agree.
Yeah. And so whatever bad things happened, I don't think it was Reagan's brainstorm. And that's the same way with Trump. Any bad things that have happened, I don't think, unless it's something where you can prove he personally went after somebody that said something bad about him. I believe that, because I think Trump is all about that ego. So, that's if somebody says something, then I can say, well, maybe he tried to do something personally or something to get back at him. But anything else, no. I mean, the bombing of Syria and all that, I don't think that was Trump's idea. I think he was pressured constantly to do it.
All they did was they fired off 50 or 60 aging Tomahawk cruise missiles to deplete the inventory so they could buy new ones.
Right.
About all they did.
But I mean, if you look Stupid. At in context, and people say, yes, of course he's kept up. He really hasn't ended the wars, but to his credit, he is apparently the first president since Jimmy Carter who hasn't started a new war anywhere. So that's good. I mean, that's pretty pathetic commentary that that's what we're looking for. But so I don't, and that doesn't mean I like him. And people think, oh, you're endorsing him. No, I'm saying, and he continues to have all the right enemies. I said,
here's the sad part. Excuse me, but if people vote because they hate Trump, allow the other side to win, the communists to win, it's over. They can't do that. You cannot do that. You've got to disengage from the personality of the man. None of us approve of what he's done in terms of keeping his word. He wants to be liked, so he tells everybody what he thinks they want to hear, so they'll like him. That's at the root of his problem. He stopped growing. He stopped maturing at about the age of 16. He's like a high school punk.
If that, and so it's on some level, like I said, I still hold out a tiny microcosm of hope that because he's unstable, he seems to be a real loose cannon still. That to whatever degree he has any sincerity in that personality, and it's not totally scripted, which I think it probably is, I still think there's a microcosm of hope that, unlike any other president in my lifetime, that he may just walk out one day and just start blurting out, 9/11 was an inside job. May forget the script for a minute. Because Roger Stone told me back when he loved my book Hidden History and contacted me, and I talked to him on the phone before Trump ran for president, and he mentioned, about Trump, getting ready to run for president, and he said, I've known him for 30 years, and he knows about all the conspiracies. He said, you'd love him. You will love him. And so I've remembered that forever because he drops those hints constantly. He'll say, some people think Vince Foster was murdered, and then he goes and nominates Brett Kavanaugh, who led the Vince Foster cover-up, to the Supreme Court. But that's the kind of stuff he does. He's hinted about explosives for 9/11. He tried to ensnare Ted Cruz in the JFK assassination thing. So was good friends with John Kennedy Jr. And I know from my own investigation that JFK Jr., he had a quest to find out who killed his father, and that's why he assassinated him himself. So You think that didn't come up behind closed doors with his good buddy Donald Trump? So, there are interesting things there. But so that's probably why it seems like I'm sympathetic to him. I mean, I think he's a buffoon, but the other side is so bad; they don't offer anything, and their basic argument is I keep trying to sell. Somebody today was saying he's a traitor, and I said, wait a minute, okay, you can call him a lot of stuff. How is he a traitor? Define how he's a traitor. And, both sides kind of throw that around. It's traitor this, traitor that. What does that mean? I mean, you could argue that all our representatives are traitors to the American people because, they've committed treason against us. But how has he committed treason against the United States government? And they have no answer for that. Just like if you say, how is he a racist or whatever? How do you define that? I mean, you can't prove there's no, test you can give to say, that, it turned green, you're a racist. You can't do that. But that's essentially what the other side does. They call names, and Trump is kind of sometimes he seems to me like in the old days of the carnival where you had the dunking booth, where somebody would sit there and you'd throw balls at him and have him dunk. I mean, sometimes that's what he looks like to me sometimes, where he's just kind of this pathetic character taking it over and over again. And of course he does, come back and call names and all that stuff. But it's, so I don't know. It's part of me, I guess, for the debate hopes that, maybe it'll degenerate into total WWE theater where, maybe, they'll try to body slam each other. I mean, that would be appropriate at this point, really, because that's the level.
It's not so incongruous at all when you think about it. You're right.
Wouldn't shock me. It would not shock me, but that's basically because if you remember the debates against Hillary Clinton, Trump walking around like that, walking around holding the microphone. I mean, that's WWE style. If you watch, wrestling, that's what they do. They walk around, they gesture to the crowd, and it's South Park spoofed that beautifully. A few years ago they had a spoof about wrestling, and they had where the kids were doing that, and the kids were actually attempting to wrestle, so the crowd started booing and said, "Get back to wrestling, we want some action." So of course they wanted them to just pick the microphone up and just walk around like that, like Trump does, and just blast the other wrestlers and make threats and call names and stuff. And that's Trump's entire political discourse, isn't it? Calling names and saying he might do this, he might do that. So it'll be interesting to see if he adopts that style where he kind of walks off the lectern and maybe he gets close to Biden like he did to Hillary, and how Biden will react if the drugs kick in or whatever. And then Biden's campaign could be over easily too, because if they can't prop him up, right, he could easily, like literally, what did he say recently? He's been in Congress for 140 years or so. I mean, he could come up, he could say something crazy like that. I mean, 200 million people have already died within the last hour of COVID or whatever.
Well, that's what, on a good night, that's the least amount of damage, that kind of thing that he'll do to himself. The meth can keep him talking and keep him, quote, alert, but it can't synthesize what we know as linear thought. It just doesn't work. Not with facts. He'll just say the words. He'll throw words out there. And I again say, listen to how he speaks. Marble mouth. He doesn't know how to say the words when he's reading them off the teleprompter. He can speak the word, but he doesn't know how to nuance it at all. All right, hang on a minute, and we'll be right back with Donald Jeffries after this. Big story about that vile Ilhan Omar. Big trouble with her. Ballot harvesting claims to be a major issue in her life. She's involved with it deeply. Her team is running it. Look at the Project Veritas video. We've got it up in headlines. You'll see it. It should be up momentarily, but it's not up for now. But this woman has got to go to prison and then be deported at the end of her prison term. That's the only just and fair thing. She's mocking this country, laughing at this country and our history and our people. She's an outright outrageous communist. They're all over the place. Joe McCarthy was right. Don't forget that.
Joe McCarthy today, and he would have a feel. I mean, but in Ilhan Omar, and again, too, I see, I try to look at all these people dispassionately. And Ilhan Omar, I gave her credit early on because she said certainly one thing that was absolutely true, and she boldly spoke out about Israel running our foreign policy, and she was exactly right. And
that's correct. That's a very safe statement to make. It's a correct statement, but the other 99 aren't. But yes,
right.
I agree with you.
Well, yeah, and that's what I said at the time. I said, yeah, I agree with her completely on that. She's absolutely right. But she also clearly appears to hate white people. I'm white, and again, I don't make any apologies for that. Why am I going to? I mean, no rational black person would be attracted to a grand wizard of the KKK that was spouting off anti-black stuff all the time. So why would any white person be attracted to that? I mean, and this is what I don't understand about the squad and all that stuff. And if they came up with some good legislation, some Huey Long type stuff about, well, let's have a debt jubilee.
Never going to happen.
No, it's never gonna
AOC,
happen.
never.
Yeah.
She's another one that needs to go. She was placed. This is another major cog in the attempted overthrow of this government.
Yeah, well, and they just know people don't. I've tried to explain about AOC. I mean, some of the stuff she says sounds palatable to me because, I'm still on the left, really, basically, in my sympathy, the old left. But you look at her history. And unfortunately, Jeff, the way the system runs, there's no way I don't care how brilliant and she certainly doesn't appear to be brilliant, but even if you're, the greatest, some of the greatest orator or the most charismatic personality in the world, if you're working as a waitress, you are not in a position even to think of running for Congress. What waitress thinks of running for Congress? Somebody has to be behind you to do that. And her own brother came out and said that she basically auditioned for the role and was hired.
It's true.
So,
did you not see the video? There was a video made about this by someone who had all the nuts and bolts. I forget the guy's name. He was terrific. He laid it all out there. There were, I think, 200 applicants for this role, and she was selected. There was a cattle call. They all auditioned for it. She got the nod. That's the truth.
Yeah, and so I would love nothing more to believe. I said the same thing about Patsy Murray in the Senate, where when she won from the Senate, several years back, she's been in there for a long time now, but her record shows what kind of an outsider she was. And she's a horrible, typical woke, politically correct authoritarian, so-called liberal. But when she came in there, basically it was, I'm just a mad housewife and I'm a nobody. And I think if she's Oregon or something.
You conned us. Another con job.
Exactly. But that just doesn't happen. Angry housewives and young waitresses. I'd love to think that people like that are mad construction workers.
Hey, only in the movies. Only in Hollywood movies.
Exactly. Only in Hollywood. So the system doesn't allow that because you have to have resources. I mean, especially if you're running in any of us, maybe if we go work, we can get enough signatures on the ballot, maybe to have on the ballot and, get less than 1% of the vote because the public's still going to vote for that stupid two-party duopoly. But to get a Democratic or Republican nomination, you have to have, first of all, you have to get the endorsement of the party. And the party's not going to endorse some real radical person. If I attempted to run as a Democrat or Republican and say the stuff I said, the party hierarchy would.
It's all rigged.
It's all rigged. So some waitress, the first thing they're going to do is scoff at her. What are you? You're a 28, whatever she was when she ran, 27, 28-year-old waitress with no experience at all, and you think you can run for Congress? It's not like you're a retired football player or actor or lawyer like most of us are, but that's usually the qualification. So when she did it, it was kind of, this is the new blood, and it would be nice to think that, regardless of what you think about their beliefs, it would be nice to think that anybody because that's what we need, and that's why we've talked about on the show before. That's why I have long been advocating that the House of Representatives be turned over to a lottery system where you just have a random group of citizens. You have real diversity, real cross-section of all opinions and races and creeds. That's the only way to do it. You get that, you'll have 435 different people coming in every 2 years. They're only in there for 2 years, so they can't really be bribed or too much within 2 years. And I think that way you would have everyone would get a little more representation, but that's the only way you're ever going to get something like waitresses or file clerks or whatever, just average people that are working class that could get anywhere near Congress. So, yeah, I think it's absurd the way she's propped up, and nobody questions her background. Of course, and if you do that, then because she's a woman, they can call you misogynistic. Because she's Hispanic, they can call you racist or whatever. So
those are all tricks. It's all tricks.
Yeah.
All conversational tricks now.
That's the opposition, and that's the level it's at. They just the left shuts you down instantly by saying, okay, well, that's racist, that's misogynistic or whatever, that's homophobic, and they don't address what you're saying. And again, it's just what the right used to do back in the 1950s, to call you, that's pinko talk, that's commie talk, and so in both cases, nobody's addressing what you're saying. Was it pinko to, be for civil rights in the 1950s? Well, a lot of people thought it was back then. Is it Nazi now or are you a Nazi if you, if you question, why, George Soros or somebody may be funding these protesters, or why these big industrialists or, people like Bezos and Gates and the richest people in the world, why they are throwing so much money into a protest movement that supposedly wants to overthrow them, right? I mean, theoretically, isn't that who they want to go after? The people
Correct.
that run it. So why are they? But you go back, if you study history, Jeff, we know what the Bolshevik Revolution was about. I mean, Professor Anthony Sutton wrote some great books, and he wrote one book called Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, where he documented how Wall Street financed the Bolshevik Revolution, and he wrote another one called Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler, where he talked about, the same thing back then. Do you really think that even back then that a frustrated painter could somehow just by virtue of this tremendous oratorical skill and going into beer halls, and he got millions of people to follow him by, come on. I mean, that's always
Hooray
been
for Hollywood. It's all a joke. And this whole thing about, remember Sticks and Stones? Look, I don't care what people call other people, the labels. All they can do is almost immediately degenerate into label throwing. That's what they do. That's what they do. Look, the fact of the matter is here, white people are generally not racist. That's just not something that's endemic to the white race. It just hasn't been. There are exceptions. Black people have an attitude. Not all of them. They'll hold on to you wonderful black Americans who are listening, and blacks in Africa. I've got blacks all over the world listening. There are a lot of younger blacks, though, who are in urban environments now, who have the tragedy of trying to be raised by a mother who may work 2 jobs, single-parent household. They've got no guidance. They're immediately sucked into the gangs. They'll get their first gun probably by the time they're 12 or 13. 49 people were shot in Lizard Lightfoot, Chicago over the weekend, and a 3-year-old girl was stabbed. Come on, they don't have a chance. But what's happening to them is they're being taught that their lives aren't going anywhere because of whites. They're teaching them racism. They're teaching them to hate whitey like I have never seen in my life. And it's going to get to the point now where on November 3rd and thereafter, we may begin to see the fruits of this kind of programming of these tragically uneducated, unwise young African Americans. And look, there's some redneck white kids that are just as dense, but we're talking about black-on-white crime here, and the statistics don't lie. The FBI stats are simple and clear. 90% of black-on-white crime is black against a white. It's not the other way around.
Right.
That's how it breaks down. That's how it works. We've been through this territory for decades, but it's sad. And I how are you going to get through to these young people and, first of all, teach them what it is to think objectively? I don't see it happening. You can't.
And you can't have a situation that has been going on for, in varying terms since the 80s. When public pressure, when Black, I don't know when Black History Month was created, whatever, that kind of stuff. When you started seeing this, and I said at the time, especially when you saw so many different groups now, because basically people don't realize, I graduated high school in 1974. There wasn't, first of all, the term Hispanic was unknown. It was an invented political term, so it hadn't been invented yet.
Yes.
I had no Hispanics in my graduating class. There was no such thing. I didn't know the term. So you fast forward, 60 years, less than that, but 50 years later, and Hispanics, again, invented term, are the new biggest minority group in America. They quickly outsurpassed blacks. Now, we imported, just think of that. No country in the world has ever done anything like that. Within less than half a century, we imported a new, almost largely, wildly, overwhelmingly very poor underclass that became our biggest minority. And that's unprecedented. But while that was happening, and you also had lots of Asian immigrants and Indian immigrants and people from the Middle East and so forth, I wondered at the time, I kept saying to myself, what do they think when they come here? And something like Black History Month happens. Do they question that? I mean, why? What is this all about? But that basically served to indoctrinate young blacks from that time forward into their entire, you go back to Aretha Franklin, RESPECT, respect yourself. This absurd black is beautiful baby and all that, which is fine to empower people and to have them have self-esteem. But I don't think you can have a society, especially a multicultural society like America is now. How can you tell one particular group, which isn't even the largest minority group in America anymore, how can you consistently tell them from the time they're little, you're beautiful because you're black? You're great because you're black. Your ancestors were kings. You invented everything.
And what are you doing? You're setting them up for grievous disappointment. The doors are not going to open. The gold coins aren't going to fill their lockers, and it just isn't going to happen.
But
you got to work for it.
You're instilling in them the fact that this is what matters. My entire being is my race. I am black, and everything pertains to me being black. But
it's all run through that filter. Everything in life, and that's not how life should be. Yeah.
But the other 86, 87% of the population that isn't black or African American, to be politically correct, they are told race is a construct, especially the white people. And you don't talk about race. We're all equal. Now, how can you possibly have a cohesive society or civilization when you're telling one group that everything is being done to keep them down because they're black? But everybody else is just kind of this mass of people, and race doesn't matter. We're all one, and race is a construct. The two don't equate. They're clashing with each other. It's like bringing Muslim immigrants in from the most patriarchal societies on earth and bringing into what is a matriarchal culture in America, where women rule the culture and have for a long time. You can't bring all these the people that want to, stone women in some cases for not wearing a headdress or looking at another man or something.
Oh, and they do.
And you don't think that's going to cause, an explosion? So we've got all these powder kegs walking around where and they know they're doing it. I mean, basically either race matters or it doesn't. So if it matters, then we should all be equally proud or whatever. I mean, I think it's stupid because it's just a genetic happenstance is what you were born. You had nothing to do with it. So why would you be proud of it? But why would you be ashamed of it? So either race is a construct like they tell everyone else, or you're beautiful because whatever color you are, like they tell black people. So, but you have to be consistent. You can't tell one, just like you can't have words, and we all know what the word is. You can't have a word where some people can say as much as they want, and other people can be fired or have their careers ruined for saying it. You can't. How do you do that? You can't have words that some people can say and some can't. But I know I'm alone in saying this because people look at it and they don't know. I don't get called racist because it's so outside the box. But I mean, I'm just looking at consistency. If you're going to have a culture and civilization, you have to have some shared values. And you can't tell little kids. You can't constantly, and that's what they do. They pump black kids up with this absurd self-esteem that is way beyond the proportion. It's kind of like what I talk about in Bullyocracy, the way they pump up athletes of all colors and make them feel, the popular kids, make them feel like they're little celebrities and they're so great because they can, play a sport or jump up and down and cheerlead or whatever. You're going to create monsters doing that. And that's what you're doing when you're creating, because you're not telling the other little kids. I mean, are people, are they propping up Asian immigrants like that? You're beautiful because you're yellow or red or whatever they consider themselves. They're not doing that. So, I mean, that's why I said at the time, I always wondered, why don't these other immigrant groups, why don't Hispanics, who are the biggest minority group now in America, why aren't they demanding to know, how come I'm not on every commercial? How come I'm not every third person in every movie? How come I'm hardly in professional sports or in the entertainment world?
Obviously, good point. Sure.
But I don't see anybody questioning that. And so, I mean, again, I realize that very few people look at this stuff like I do. But as I'm watching it, just because I really would prefer to never. And I've said for a long time, I wish they would take race, the category of race, out of every. It shouldn't exist, maybe with the exception of the census, just for purposes of to keep a tab on population. But any job application, anything. If you're asking the race of a person, there's only one purpose that can have, and that's to cause some kind of discrimination. So I think it should just be banned, but people don't want to do that because everybody wants to discriminate. Maybe it used to be in the past that they wanted to discriminate against blacks and non-whites and women, but now they want to do it to fill quotas and try to, hire them as favoritism. And both ways are wrong. I mean, it's just, we have to have a fair society, and everybody should be treated equally. Like Martin Luther King said, judge everyone by the content of their character.
Well, good luck. The society is being pushed in opposite directions from the centrist hope that you're spelling out there. It's being literally radicalized around the clock. Young people are so open to socialism. It's so appealing to them. Well, we have so much money in this country. It's the most powerful country in the world. We certainly have the money, if we take it away from the rich people, to pay for everything for everybody. No problem. Well, that would turn this nation into an entire cesspool of losers. There would be no initiative left. First of all, they just wait around for their checks. What good would they be? They would be literally the useless eaters that Henry Kissinger talked about.
But you're right. But they as Tucker Carlson has pointed out, and I've been saying for a long time, is that you have to have an answer to the socialist argument. And our answer, my book Survival of the Richest documents it clearly. This system, whatever it is, I call it predatory or crony capitalism. It certainly isn't free enterprise. It's rigged, as Donald Trump said. It's a rigged system. That's why he doesn't pay taxes. I mean, every part of it is rigged. This system is rigged. It doesn't work for 80% of the people. It works really well for the top 1% and really very good for like the 19% under that run the mess. But the 80% of the people, the 70-some percent that are living paycheck to paycheck, that don't have $500 in the bank, the people at the bottom and living on the streets, you can't tell them socialism is bad because they're looking at, they can't afford health care, they can't afford all this and that. So you have to have an alternative. And then when you look at things like I discovered when I wrote the postscript to the new paperback edition of Survival of the Richest, I found articles that people have done the math, the trillions and trillions of dollars of collective wealth in this country. If you divided it up equally between every man, woman, and child in this country, it would come to $344,000 each. Now, we don't want to do that, but that shows you how much money is out there and how unbelievably unfairly it's being distributed. You can't, it's ridiculous for somebody to be, some of these guys I documented are making $700,000 in retirement every month. That's right. More than some people make in their lifetimes. And, people on the internet
all these golden parachutes and
yes.
Bonuses, they're disgusting, and I couldn't agree more. There should be a 1% tax on every stock that is sold on Wall Street, and that 1% should go for some national program to treat all Americans and help them raise the quality of their lives. It's not hard to figure out.
Huey Long's Share the Wealth program was so great because he exempted the first $1 million from income tax. That's what he wanted to do. $1 million in the 1930s.
See, that's a very slick and very shrewd, forward-looking approach. I'm amazed to hear it even now. Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't advertise it because the left hated Huey Long. because they didn't want to do that.
Well,
Huey
they
Long
killed him.
is smeared as a yeah, they killed him, but because they knew Huey Long wasn't going to do what they ended up doing, and that was squeezing out the middle class. Because the middle class, what made America great, to the extent that it was ever great, is that middle class, and it was born mostly in the post-war era, largely because of the jobs created by the defense industry and everything, kind of a double-edged sword. But that's what built the suburbs. That built this incredible middle class that gave us the highest standard of living the world has ever seen for a while. That's what made America great. But what came with that, Jeff? A top tax rate of 90% in the 1950s under Eisenhower. And, but how many conservatives would support that now? But that's when America was threatened. I'm not, justifying that, but because they had loopholes even then. But that's how they managed to keep it so that the president of a company, not the CEO, term hadn't been invented, just like Hispanics hadn't been invented yet. They might have made 5 to 10 times more than their employees, not hundreds or thousands of times more. And that was the problem, is that you didn't have that disparity. Of course, everybody, if the higher you went up, you build a company, of course you do better than everyone. You deserve more. It's your company. But nobody's life is worth thousands of times more than the guy, especially the people that are doing the work no one wants to do. I mean, everybody would love to sit in an office and stare, be a vice president in charge of looking out the window. So that's right, JR. That's right, JR. And then you get, 6-figure bonus for saying that's right all the time. That's pretty much your job. But anybody can do that. But, who wants to clean the toilets out? You take any corporation and you let the entire executive staff leave and never come into work for a month. And you let the janitorial staff not come in for a month. Whose absence do you think would be noticed? And that ought to tell you who's doing the important work. But I know people don't look at it like I do. But it's these are the things I think that the left should be talking about. But instead, they're just yelling racist and all this woke nonsense.
Well, they're not the left anymore. They're the communist Bolshevik left. It's a different kind of a left. It's not an enlightened left that we used to know 50, 100 years ago. It's gone. It's just gone. Police departments in several states are reporting interruptions now in their emergency call services, 911. People can't call in.